And as I was listening to all the speakers and panelists, I kept thinking that common throughout achieving these shared visions of energy security and energy modernization of our infrastructure is the private utility communications networks that underpin these operations and how essential they are. So it is not widely understood in our industry that utilities of all shapes and sizes own and operate their own private communications networks. I certainly didn't understand this when Joy Ditto, UTC's former CEO, my good friend and now CEO of APPA, brought me to UTC 3 years ago, but they are absolutely foundational. So increasing the understanding of how essential these private communications networks are for these visions that we share is my goal here today. I'm going to use the page from the UTC playbook to describe private utility communications networks, how they're important in blue sky operations, so for day-to-day operational reliability, how they're important for gray sky events, such as natural disasters, hurricanes, et cetera, how they're going to be critical in black sky events, so think electromagnetic pulse or EMP types of situations. And then also to coin a phrase that Joy uses a lot, gold sky situations, which are our smart grids of the future, our smart cities, et cetera. So, first let me tell you a little bit about UTC. The Utilities Technology Council has been around for 70 plus years. We represent investor-owned utilities, rural cooperative utilities, public power, mostly electric, natural gas and oil pipelines, and water utilities. And we have international members as well. And the reason why we represent this vast array of business models and different types of utilities is because when it comes to their information and communications technology needs, they're usually united and have those same types of needs. So, private utility networks. They are a combination of wireline and wireless. Wireline, think copper, increasingly fiber optic. A number of our members have announced plans for major investments in expanded fiber optic networks going forward. If they're wireless, they are usually microwave communication systems, but also push-to-talk mobile radios. Think about the radios that personnel are using post-hurricanes, et cetera. If they are wireless, those wireless systems are dependent on spectrum. Spectrum is a naturally occurring phenomenon that is a finite resource. And because of this, the allocation of that spectrum is overseen by the Federal Communications Commission, an independent agency whose primary focus is not energy security and energy reliability, but I'll get to that later. So, these private utility networks are used, and we have them, because they are supporting mission-critical functions. And when I talk about mission-critical functions, I'm talking about such things as real-time situational awareness, so knowing exactly how much energy is being moved across the grid or moved through pipelines. I'm talking about emergency systems, so emergency power shutoffs, safety systems. I'm talking about teleprotection, the types of operations that must happen in milliseconds, that keep lines from overheating, that keep equipment from being damaged, that keep us from having power disruptions. And I'm talking about those types of mission-critical functions that are essential for personnel safety. So again, in reference to the hurricanes, think about linemen and women out in the field needing to know whether or not a line is energized or not so that they can quickly restore power. So again, as I mentioned, these mission-critical functions, they need to happen basically in milliseconds. And so having access to interference-free spectrum is really essential. Think about if you would have interference. We can tolerate our cell phone being interfered with, right? That it's annoying, yes, but is it detrimental to our safety? Probably not. But for these mission-critical functions that utilities use their private communications networks for, interference can be problematic. So we have a number of opportunities here with our private communications networks. Again, as I mentioned, the blue sky operations that we utilize. Those private communication networks are also highly reliable and resilient when it comes to staying on post-hurricanes and natural disasters. So for example, post-Hurricane Katrina, it was utility communications networks that actually were resilient, stayed online, and helped the communications sector come back online. So they're very important for increasing the speed and recovery from those natural disasters. We've also recognized how important these private communications networks are for black sky types of events. So the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, which is the group of 30 electric utility CEOs that serve as the primary point of contact between the federal government and the private industry on critical infrastructure protection issues, has increasingly understood and realized that communications networks and their resilience are really important to critical infrastructure protection. This has come about largely because in almost every national level exercise, including GridX, which Don Santa mentioned not too long ago, that communications networks could be a real Achilles heel for us. So the industry has devoted quite a bit of time and attention on developing resilient communications plans for dealing with black sky types of events. One example is the Resilient Communications Working Group that over the past year did a pilot demonstration of how, I kind of call it the MacGyver project, or others in the working group have referred to it as such. It was, if we had, say, an electromagnetic pulse type of situation, and we knew that some of our communications types of capabilities were no longer available to us, how would you enable Hydro One to communicate with the New York Power Authority, to communicate with PJM, to communicate with Dominion, to communicate then maybe with Alabama Power, to re-energize the Eastern Interconnect, right? Understanding how you scale that type of network, the interoperability of that network, what technologies might be available, is really important to us continuing to improve and harden our systems. And that pilot and carry-on work from that effort is ongoing. Joy Ditto, our former CEO, still testified on this at a Senate hearing in 2018 where this was a realization. So I'm going to go now and talk a little bit about the challenges, and I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'll be quick. But as I just described, we have some challenges in thinking through the technology available for us for black sky events, but we're also facing challenges for blue sky events as well. So for example, we are facing a blue sky operational challenge right now from the Federal Communications Commission in a proceeding focused on 6 gigahertz spectrum band. That band is utilized by hundreds of utilities. Water, natural gas is actually used by all kinds of critical infrastructure industries because of how reliable it is for their critical operations. Right now, the FCC has proposed to open up the 6 gigahertz spectrum band, which has previously only been open to license holders in the band, to unlicensed spectrum sharing. So companies that are very interested in this proposal are companies like Google, Facebook, Qualcomm, Broadcom, right? Because spectrum is a finite resource, they're looking for areas where they can expand Internet of Things types of operations, enhance capacity for these types of operations. Now, while this goal and the innovation that will come with it is very laudable, it can't come at the expense of critical infrastructure industries' interference-free, reliable communications. So we've been working very closely with the Federal Communications Commission and the big technology companies to help them understand what interference means for us, right? Right now, the proposal and the interference mitigations that have been proposed are largely untested. In fact, some of them are just conceptual in nature. So as an industry, we're really trying to encourage a robust understanding of the technologies involved, how we would ensure that critical infrastructure industries will not be interfered with and can continue to provide reliable operations. Another challenge for us is, but opportunity as well, is in that gray sky scenario type of situation. So right now you'll hear quite a bit about the race to 5G and what 5G will bring to communications and the importance of it. At the heart of the deployment of 5G is largely in electric infrastructure poles, right? So the deployment of those small cells, et cetera, that are going to enhance these 5G networks, make them possible, are going to need to partner with electric infrastructure. What we are trying to encourage right now is discussions about how you ensure the integrity of that infrastructure, that you don't overload those poles, right? That there are safety considerations taken into consideration, because we recognize as electric utilities, gas utilities, water utilities as well, we will benefit from these networks and these technologies as well. But let's do it together. Let's think about this very holistically. For the gold sky types of challenges that we face, as I mentioned, spectrum is a finite resource. And so we're going to have to get creative as a country in thinking through how we allocate spectrum as efficiently and effectively as possible, recognizing the importance of critical infrastructure. So as we think about smart meters, smart cities, et cetera, let's bring all the interested parties together to the table at once as we're thinking about in what bands could these operations take place? How are the allocations going to occur so that they are weighted in such a way to adequately think of critical infrastructure owners and operators and the needs that they have? So there are a lot of opportunities in front of us. There are a lot of challenges. It's just extremely important that we think about the nexus between these different sectors, how they are interconnected and interrelated, and how we can work together to solve these challenges going forward.